Hey everybody, welcome to Practical Alchemy. Today is going to be part 2 of the V-Carve sign tutorial, and in this part of the video, I'm going to be showing you how to take your tool paths and actually cut them out on your CNC machine. Now, this video is going to be walking through all of the major process steps so that you can follow along, but it is not intended to be an absolute beginner's guide to V-carving. If you have never done a V-carve before, I highly recommend you jump over to my other video that I posted a few weeks ago, link is here, and then jump back to this one. And with our introductions out of the way, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is prep our stock material. For this project, I picked a lighter color plywood that I had lying around the shop, and I put a medium coat of stain on top of it. That's going to give us a really nice contrast when we do our V-carve, and it's going to give it that little more rustic pub look. Once our workpiece has had a chance to dry, we're going to grab a piece of masking tape and we are going to use that to mark the center point. Now we are going to position our workpiece so that it's square to the table, and we are going to clamp it down on all four corners, making sure that it does not move and making sure that our clamps are well outside of the travel path of our CNC router. Then we are going to install our V-Carve bit. For this project, I'm using the Armana 90-degree V-Carve bit, which I really like. It is kind of my go-to for V-carving because I really like the removable blades. Then, with the bit installed, it is time to jog our machine over so that we can zero out the X and Y axes over the mark that we made for the center point. All right, with the X and Y axis set, it is now time to zero out the Z axis. Now for this example, I'm using a thin sheet of tracing paper. I have a Pro Block, but it's not calibrated correctly, so a thin sheet of paper will work just fine. Now, this next step is a little bit silly, but I used a pretty big piece of tape for this example, and I wanted to trim it back so that as the carve was going, I wasn't cutting into the piece of tape where I didn't need to. Now, you don't want to remove that 0 point completely. You may need it later in case you need to run another carve, make some adjustments to your setting, or maybe the power goes out mid-carve. You just never know. All right, with the machine set up and the workpiece in place, it's now time to load up our file. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I'm actually running a OneFinity CNC router. Love this machine, but regardless of what you're using, the process is going to be exactly the same. And make sure to adjust your router speed and turn it on before you hit play. Once the machine starts running, as you can see, I've set my path up to kind of work outside in, so I always like to carve the smallest elements first, and then leave the bigger elements till the end. All right, things seem to be going well, so let's speed this video up a little bit. While we're watching this run, I'll just let you know that this took about 10 minutes to complete using the feeds and speeds that I set. Okay, let's stop here for a second because I want to point something out. I think this looks really nice as a design on a square frame. So if you prefer this look to the more ornate frame, just don't put that into your tool path and you've got a really nice alternate configuration of this design. But I exported everything as one V-Carve file, so the last thing that's going to do is cut out the frame. Now, with that done, we're going to go ahead and clean up our design a little bit. So connect the vacuum hose. I typically would run with a dust boot, but I did it without it so that you guys could see it. So you're welcome. Now, before we move on to our next tool path, let's do a little inspection. As you can see here, I've got a little bit of variation in the workpiece thickness, so that's why the line is thinning out right there. And another thing that I'm not super stoked on is it does seem like I'm losing a little bit of detail in the eye of the snake, probably because I'm using a pretty low quality of lumber for this test. And I'm also seeing a similar thing in the cups. So could be the quality of lumber. You may also, for these very fine details, want to consider running those with a sharper bit angle than the 90-degree bit that I'm using. That's pretty wide for such thin lines. Now, with all that said, I'm still really happy with the final outcome, so I'm going to go back and do one more finishing pass just to clean up some of the fuzzies. And once that's finished, I'm going to grab my Jenny 1/4-inch upcut downcut bit, which I'm going to use to cut out my frame. So obviously, once it's installed, I'm going to have to re-zero the Z axis. Okay, and once that's set, please make sure to remember to reset your router speed to the correct settings before you proceed with the cut file. All right, with all that done, we are going to switch her on and start our cutout pass. Now, I'm going to leave the dust boot off for this so that you can see it, but this is going to be much messier than our V-Carve, so I highly recommend you use your dust boot for this process. Yeah, you can already see how dirty it's getting on the work table. Now, astute observers may notice that there is a small notch at the bottom of my sign, and that is because I set the contour to the wrong side of the path. Yeah, accidents happen, especially when I'm trying to record videos at the same time that I'm setting things up. Sometimes I do miss things, and thankfully this was a pretty small error and I was able to correct it in the first part of the video. But yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer, but not too big of a deal. All right, before you unclamp your workpiece, make sure that you inspect it and ensure that you're cutting all the way through. If not, run the pass again at a slightly deeper Z depth. And then once you're sure that you're cut through, you can unclamp and it's time for the grand reveal. Oh yeah, all right. After this obligatory beauty shot, we got to talk about the tabs and how to remove those. All right, let's do that. To remove my tabs, I like to use the battery-powered oscillating saw. Really nice for doing that. So I'm going to flip it over. Make sure that you put it on a protected work surface. I did not, but you don't want to scratch it up. And then just be very careful to stay out on the outer edges of your tabs as you cut through. Obviously, I'm a little ham-fisted here because I'm trying to work around the camera. Once you successfully removed all of your tabs, you are going to very carefully remove your workpiece from the frame. And whew, this is looking sharp, literally and figuratively. So we still got to clean up those tabs from the workpiece side. A lot of different ways you could clean up these tabs. Laminate router bit is probably the best way to do it, but I don't have one in front of me, so we're just going to use that oscillating saw again and just run that blade right across our surface, being very careful to clean up our tabs. Don't run it the wrong way, or it is going to blow out the back of your work. Bad. Then we're going to run a quick sanding pass just to make sure that everything is nice and clean and smooth. Same thing on the back here, just want to do some quick sanding to make sure everything's nice and smooth. As you can see, I've used the bench cookies there to make sure that I'm not scratching up the front of my workpiece. The thing that we need to do is figure out how we're going to hang this thing. A technique that I really like for these simple signs is to just grab some very simple screw-in open-ended hooks, just like this. And these are pretty easy to install. Just grab your drill and put some pilot holes into the top here. And once you've drilled a pilot hole into both sides, it's really pretty simple. You're just going to put these things in by hand, making sure that your pilot hole is large enough so that you are not splitting this out, especially for very thin workpieces like this. Simple, easy, we're done. Okay, now this is actually going to kill two birds with one stone because not only are we going to use it to hang our sign, we are also going to use it to put a clear coat on here. Especially if this thing is going to be going outside, you want to make sure that it is protected from the elements and isn't going to warp or crack. So I'm going to put a few coats of spray-on polyurethane semi-gloss on here to give it that nice shine and to protect the wood. And once that's dried, you are ready to open your bar for business. All right, that is going to do it for today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you had any questions or topics you'd like to see in future videos, make sure to leave those in the comments below. And as always, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date as I release new content. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. And happy St. Patrick's Day.